First off, for the folks who are coming in from the previous sessions, welcome. I'm really excited to have you guys here. This session is really going to be focused on the real emerging metric of NDR, or net dollar retention. And my name is Connor Nolan. I oversee our global account management function at Clary. So I own the commercial accountability customers, so the retention and growth of our customer base. I partner closely with our leader of our customer success team, Meredith Hovick. And for today's session, we have a really great panel. We've got Jeff Deepa, who is the CRO of Gainsight, an incredible customer of ours, a great partner. He's going to be able to kind of bring that CRO perspective, that point of view around what net dollar retention means to his business, how retention and growth of customers is a real strategic lever to him and his career and his business objectives and his organization's focus and aims. We've got David Sakamoto, who is our VP of Customer Success over at GitLab. Again, going to be bringing that real customer-centric perspective around how at GitLab they're organizing, kind of managing their business to really focus on retention, customer success, and growth. And then lastly, we have Dion Hedgepath, who's coming from Sumo Logic, where she is our Chief Customer Officer. So again, bringing really a nice breadth of responsibilities of people who are kind of in that core revenue-focused arena, and then two really fantastically backgrounds where they've had a long breadth in customer success and bring that perspective, whether it be from Cisco, whether it be from just a whole host of larger enterprises, all the way up through now where they are today, and really kind of leading the charge within their organization. So one thing I would really like to do before we kind of kick things off is I would like to have, for the folks who are here in the chat, you'll notice on the right, we've got an area where you can ask questions throughout the panel, right? We're gonna have about 30 minutes together. So use this time to your best ability to get the questions you're most interested in hearing answers to out in the open. I wanna lead with one question, and it's a simple question, which is if I were to ask you in one word, what does customer success mean to you or to your organization? I would love for in one word for you to capture that and put that in the chat. Share what customer success means to you and your organization, and ultimately the aim of your business. And as we start to see things coming through the chat, it'll be great because it'll just kind of wrap us around kind of how you're thinking. But I want to get going here because these three leaders, I think, have a lot to share. And for the folks who are in the session today, hopefully you're going to be able to take away some really great learnings that you can bring back to your organization. So I want to kind of kick things off. And the first question I want to ask is really aimed at Jeff, because Jeff is our CRO on the panel, right? He's the person who kind of wears the number. He wears the expectation of the CEO and board around the revenue growth and kind of constant evolution of the business at Gainsight. So Jeff, when you think about customer success, when you think about NDR, what is this metric? What does this ecosystem of responsibilities ultimately mean to you? And why are you so focused on it as a CRO?
Thanks, Connor. And firstly, just happy to be here and glad to share the panel with Dion and David. So looking forward to the discussion. Clearly for Gainsight, customer success is not just a function. It's core to what we do. It's core to what we bring to market. Now, when I look at our business as a CRO, there's a number of different areas that can go drive growth for us. And they come at varying levels of investment, right? Ultimately you're breaking down into recurring versus net new acquisition. I will tell you, if this last year has taught me anything, it's just reinforced the importance of having a defined approach to retention and expansion that goes well beyond just defense. We actually ran a survey at Gainsight not long ago, and it was all around NDR, and asked executives, what are the strategies that you're focusing on to go drive your NDR? And honestly, at the top of the list was value selling. Followed closely by how do you drive product adoption, and how do you have proactive identification of churn risk? Now, I'm incredibly passionate about the first, value selling, but with a bit of a twist. So at Gainsight, we've got an initiative here. It's called O2, that's code for operationalizing outcomes. And it's really about integrating value selling and value delivery. And what that means is we've built this taxonomy around outcomes. And these are the outcomes that Gainsight can go drive for customers. And we leverage prescriptive paths that, most of our customers have had the ability to go get a quicker time to value if they follow these paths. Now, what's powerful about how we've deployed this is we've effectively blurred the line from pre-sales to post-sales, which in my view is really, really key to driving NDR, because let's face it, you need that shared framework across CS, marketing, sales, services. Silos crush your customer experience. In practice, what does this actually mean? So my field sales team goes out very early in client engagements, and we create a value hypothesis, an outcome hypothesis, which is, identifying the priorities. What are the goals? But most importantly, what are the metrics we can use to measure success and impact? And we take that, we roll it right into a success plan. So that effectively drives the customer engagement from early in the life cycle all the way through historically post-sale, but it really, really blurs that line, and it allows our CS team to go drive those results. And this becomes just a flywheel for us, because our early prospect engagements are way more fruitful because we've got real workflows, real metrics to go align around, and then they turn into verified outcomes. And when you have that verified outcome, it's much easier to have a predictable expansion path with those customers.
I love that. I think that verifiable kind of outcome is so key. I think sometimes so many organizations find themselves kind of chasing a goal that maybe isn't in perfect alignment with their customer's North Star. And they might think they're winning over here while their customer is really focused on winning over here. So I think that's really, really cool you guys are operationalizing that. So Dion, David, in your roles in customer success, I mean, how at your organizations is that kind of alignment to pre and post sales working, and how do you guys set your organizations up?
It's almost awkward how I have so much of the same to say that Jeff just said. So to not repeat everything, but I'll tell you, we do it at Sumo. And honestly, I've struggled with this, probably my, fourth SaaS company, pretty much the same role. It's hard to get rid of the handoff, but that should be the ultimate goal for all of us, that there is no such thing as pre and post, right? So at Sumo, we actually have a value office. And I would say at a high level, I think what you guys want to do is, every company has a sales methodology. You should not create your own post-sales methodology. We need to use the sales methodology, whether it's MEDDIC, in our case, it's called value selling. Use the same taxonomy. And like Jeff said, we're creating the success plan from the sales methodology assets that get created, so that the customer doesn't feel like there's a handoff at all. There is a handoff, there is a call that happens with sales, but before we even do the call, we can go to the sales intelligence portal, get the value prompter, the 3 whys, why buy now, right? All the stuff that sales has to build in order to close deals, and we create the success plan from it. It's not all easy, it's still manual for us. But we are automating that process. That's the next evolution for us, which is then you just have an engine that copy pastes a lot from the sales assets into the success plan, and that's the start of it. So that's what we're working on now.
That's great.
Yeah, we have a very similar approach, and I think a lot of it's about alignment around that customer journey, that customer experience. And I saw Kay had her answer among a bunch of really great answers. Customer success is the outcomes plus the experience. And as Dion said, experience isn't handoffs. Experience is just progression towards achieving the outcome that they're looking for, or the realizing the value that they were seeking. And so I think the key thing for, as these traditional roles kind of change and can become a little more blurred, you need to make sure you have the right focus. And I look at it in kind of 2 pillars. You have the customer focus. So that's, are we driving the outcome? Are we driving that real value realization? Is it with a positive experience? But I think it's important that you should be shy. This is also a commercial motion. So we're driving this with the intention of getting that renewal, that expansion, ultimately that net dollar retention that you're seeking. And I think a key thing that's really important as you think about, a lot of times success managers feel uncomfortable talking about the commercial aspect. And while at GitLab, we don't actually, our TAMs or CSMs don't drive that. It should be part of that, because the transaction is part of the journey. So I think it's really important you can establish that and kind of build comfort through establishing process and playbooks for your team.
No, I love that. And it's a perfect segue into kind of where I wanted to go next, because I think one thing that we're seeing in this world of post-sales is this evolution of roles and responsibilities, right? We're seeing the lines starting to blur between what does an AE do, right? What does an account executive do? Do we have account managers? Do we have customer success managers as a dedicated function? Or is it more of a set of responsibilities, but it's not a person? Do we have renewal managers, or do we have contract specialists? It's like you see this proliferation of roles, and I think it'll be great to maybe David and Dion, like I'd love to have you guys share a little bit around like how have you thought about your post-sale organization and structuring your organization to manage the roles and responsibilities of success.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in first. So thanks. It's probably the most prevalent question I get, not just when I start a new company, but I advise startups all the time, and they're always like, "What roles should we have, and do we have the right roles?" And what I always say is, don't start with the roles. What you have to do is start with outlining the journey map and really creating what are all the key activities that you need to do to drive retention, expansion, upsell. And then once you lay out all the activities, you should lay out the skills needed to execute those activities. That'll start to inform you how many roles you need. Because obviously in a simple model, if you can have one person run all the activities, do it, right? That's why I actually think then if you start the activities, lay out the skills, and then the time needed, is it a daily activity or a quarterly activity? The answer actually is fairly obvious how many roles you need. And that's why you see it all over the map. It's because there's different renewal complexity, there's different product complexity, competition is different. So I don't think there's one size fits all, but if you start in that manner, you will have the answer.
Yeah, I agree. And I 100% agree with Dion. I think of building that customer success motion is like you have to align it with the DNA of the product, align it with what your solution needs. You have to align it with the corporate values that you have, and ultimately the experience you want to deliver to your customers. And I think in the market you see a lot of proliferation, which actually for me is really exciting to connect with leaders and understand how they're solving problems. And there's no one size fits all. I mean, I think that's a quick answer to share with everybody. But what I would suggest is connect with folks that have similar solutions, and just to kind of stretch your mind around the art of the possible. But for us, what's really important is we lay out the roles in terms of, as Dion said, what's going to be required through the journey at different stages, because it's there's nobody that owns the customer per se. It's almost like the customer journey is going to facilitate the RACI. So who is responsible and accountable for different steps and touch points in that journey. And while there's no necessarily right or wrong formulaic answer, what's important is the team aligns and they know how to make sure that that is clear. Because if it's not clear internally, I can guarantee it'll be not clear. It'll be very obvious to your customers.
For sure. Yeah. And Jeff, I'd love to get your thoughts too, because, as you do start to think about the roles and responsibilities, I think about compensation, metrics of management, KPIs, as a CRO, when you look at your direct sellers, when you look at your customer success organization, you look at kind of the ecosystem of people supporting your customers, what have you thought about as a CRO? What are those things? How do you make sure that like the commercial orientation, right, that responsibility of negotiating and managing the terms and agreements you have with your customers doesn't dilute their conviction in your customer success managers as that advisor, right? That person that can walk in and truly make a suggestion or challenge the customer, but yet the customer doesn't feel like that they're going to see an order form on the next meeting.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I can tell you, I get the question all the time, like how should you organize, whether it's an account management team, a renewals team, your direct sales team, where do expansions and cross sells go? Unfortunately, I can give you the answer. It depends, because it's going to depend, to what David said. Are you PLG? Are you product-led growth? Are you an enterprise sales motion? Like all of those come with a little bit of a different flavor that makes sense. But one thing I do want to double click on that Dion said. And both David talked a lot about that customer journey. And what I think is really, really important is not just at the start of when they become a customer, but we spend a lot of time understanding the buyer's journey. And when you do that, you'll understand that your customers join you at different points in their kind of capability maturity curve with regard to whatever product you're bringing to market. For us, it happens to be customer success. Depending on where we pick up that customer, there's different obstacles and different objectives that they have to go make these initiatives successful, which are really, really key, because oftentimes you might be picking up a customer at a point where you might want to wait. They might not be ready to engage with you in a way that they'll be successful and grow with you. But when you know that buyer's journey, and then you map it into your customer's journey, the term David just used, the RACI, becomes absolutely of critical importance. Everyone has to know, what role am I playing on this win team? How do I drive the ball forward? And I think it's really, really key for David and Dion and myself, like CROs and CCOs, to be shoulder to shoulder. In fact, at our revenue kickoff this year, our CCO and myself, were on stage talking about end-to-end operationalizing outcomes. We were dressed up a little bit funny, but showing the team that this is really, really a critical relationship, and this is how you communicate and work together.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. And I will say selfishly, one of the things that I'm going to take away from even just this panel and preparing for this panel is some of the kind of earlier conversations I've had with the three of you. And one thing that stood out on our last call, and I think, David, it was you kind of emphasized this, and I'd love to kind of talk to all of you guys about this, which is that operationalizing of that success plan, that framework, that process, that rigor, right? It kind of gets into the as we've all probably heard, people, process, tools. I'd love to kind of understand from the three of you what evolutions you've seen, right? I mean, obviously we all went through COVID last year, right? And the business impact of COVID, I think, was a real wake-up call to the criticality of your customer base, because that the world of acquisition is fickle, right? You never know what might stand in the way of something that can slow down your pace of acquisition, right? Maybe it's a new competitor, maybe it's market conditions, whatever it might be. But your customers are that piece of gold, that thing that needs to always be cherished. And so tell me a little bit about how the frameworks, the rigor, the process has evolved for you guys within your organizations. Because I think a lot of folks who are attending this are probably thinking to themselves, what is our process? How are we structured? Do we have that rigor in place? And I'd love for them to kind of hear how you guys got to where you're at.
Sure. I'll take a first cut at that. I mean, I think, at least if I talk about the two goals, customer and company, the company goal in DR, it doesn't just happen by accident, right? So I highly, think about, we're talking about the customer journey. Think about how you instrument that. So how do you, if we're talking about kind of take an account plan, transitioning into a success plan, where you have the outcomes, the goals, the metrics, like change management. But ultimately, are you instrumenting that? So are you tracking the success plans? Are you tracking whether you're doing EBRs? Are you tracking make sure that you've got the right engagement with customers? And then from a customer lifecycle view, the same thing. You want to have leading metrics that are going to help you understand whether you're going to have a successful renewal and expansion. And ultimately, for us, it's time to value. It's adoption of use cases. But beyond that, do you have triggers that identify when you can bring more value and have expansion use cases? Do you have playbooks for those expansion? Are you tracking that? Are you tracking the success of them? If they succeeded, didn't succeed, why? So you can learn and improve. And then ultimately, if you want to, we've been talking a lot about customer experience. Are you collecting that sentiment along the way to make sure you understand where they're at? And ultimately, again, if you look at you're going to ultimately hopefully drive that customer outcome, that value realization, and then the NDR on behalf of the company.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously I agree with everything we said. There's, you got to get playbooks, you've got to have all these tactics around operations. You have to have a great operations function too, by the way. One of the most important first things you do when you take a role like this. But one of the key things that I think you also need to do, but it takes time to vet and make it really accurate, is a weighted health score. I mean, this absolutely varies based on your company. You can't steal someone else's weighted health score. But once you get it right, and ours is made up of 6 components, we tested it on hundreds of counts, right? Once you know what your true red, yellow, green is, and you invest in that, and you get your whole leadership inspecting it, making it accurate, the weightings over time, you can do so much with this. You can measure the time from subscription start to green. In fact, I just plotted, right, we're starting our new quarter, right? As we enter the renewal, the next quarter, what does my forecast look like? What percentages of the customers renewing are green versus red? Do I believe the forecast based off that? We could start to market to green customers. So there's so many things in the CS arsenal, but for me, I am like, that is one of the first things I think you got to get in place and make that.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll say, Connor, from my end, it almost seems like this question's a layup, obviously, given what we do. But we have, so Gainsight deploys, we call it GONG, Gainsight on Gainsight. And I think it was David mentioned earlier that like you need to have visibility across the entire organization. So it's one thing for the customer success person to go look and understand the health score. It's another thing to have calls to actions that engage sales, that engage the appropriate resource to drive that customer along their journey. So 100% to everything David and Dion said, but our goal and one of the other areas that I think is important on top of it is with all this data, also having the interlock and the feedback loop back to product. Because I think one of the other things from an NDR perspective that sometimes gets overlooked is ensuring that any gap between your client's desired outcome and what your product delivers gets closed. And that's how the flywheel with all this data comes back and starts feeding into your future customers.
Yeah, love it. Maybe let me add one more thing. One of the things that I think is also important part of the weighted health score or whatever motion you're running is to be able to track the sentiment of the economic buyer. That's always the one reason why you get a surprise of adoption's amazing, but there's an economic buyer swap. And so I'm a big believer of having the team as part of the score. Ours is worth 20 points, actually, which I think is the right amount of points out of 100, where if there's no economic buyer, there's a swap, you're at risk, right? And so that would probably be another takeaway I would tell this audience.
I think that's great. And I think it's one of the things that resonates too is it's different for every company, right? I think you even said that about your health score, right? It's like, I think it's a fun thing for businesses to sit down and say, what is health for us, right? Is it telemetry insights, right? Is it how they're using or engaging with the product? Is it usage-based insights around like consumption or adoption? Is it, activity that they have with their team, right? Or how active is their funnel, right? I mean, there's so many different things you could stare at on a whiteboard and say, what is health to us? And another thing that I think is kind of interesting, as I've seen with multiple companies, is there's one question that a lot of people don't ask that I think they should, which is, what does it mean to be green versus yellow? Right? What's really the difference? Like, does a green customer buy differently? Right? Do they buy different products? Do they buy faster? Is their cycle time different? Is their ASP different? Is your discount lever different with a green customer versus a yellow customer? Is your time to value? Is your average customer life cycle longer, right? Like there's all the so what, who cares of green versus yellow? I think that's another interesting thing that a lot of companies need to ask themselves is, do we know? And if we don't know, how do we go find out?
Well, and the beauty is, Connor, once you have your scoring done, like I can tell you last quarter, we renewed our green customers at 99%. So I know it's right. And I also could tell you what we renewed our red customers at, but I'm not going to do it on this panel, but we know we have a problem there. And so you at least know everyone rallies around the red. The goal is to get them to green and just improve over time.
For sure. And Chris asked a question that I'd cue up to you guys is, we've talked about some of these unique elements that reflect success. What are maybe a couple of those things for you guys? What is an indicator of health?
Yeah, I can give you ours. I mean, kind of memorize this thing so much. So 20% of our 100 points is EP sentiment. 30% is ingest as a percent to plan, because that's how our licensing model works. 30% is all adoption, 5%, 5 points is on how well trained they are. And then 15 points we give to the CSM to right size the score for things like they got bought, so put that sentiment 15 points down to 0. Or the customer loves us that they renew, even though the adoption's not quite there yet, the team could give that full 15 points and right size.
Almost like a health hedge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a health hedge. I love it. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, David?
For us, a key thing is around the adoption, which isn't in itself super unique. But our solution is a DevOps platform. So right now the market has a bunch of disparate, best in class, they integrate together. And for us, what's really, really critical for customers to realize the value of the DevOps platform is to adopt multiple stages. So the way we look at it, if we're just a single stage against another point product, we're at great risk. If they adopt 2 stages, they actually start to see the value of like single data store, unified experience. So for us, the key thing is, are they adopting multiple stages, which really unlocks the power and value of the platform. And that's an example. Like adoption isn't unique, but it is for our solution, and it's considering both our solution, the customer change management and what that looks like, as well as the market competition. So when we talk about making it, aligning it to the DNA, you want to think about all of those factors that would drive to a successful or unsuccessful renewal.
Love that.
I think
Yeah, take us home. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll add. So, I mean, from our side as well, adoption is key, especially from a sales standpoint, because there's a number of features and subsets of Gainsight that as you start to adopt those, we recognize there's more value that's being derived, and therefore typically more use comes with it. But one other unique metric, I think for us at least, and Dion kind of alluded to it, sponsor tracking. Especially in the customer success industry, the industry is growing really, really fast, and we have customers that move from account to account. And oftentimes what you find is customers that have, or prospects that have engaged before and have gone through a customer success deployment are much more likely to see the full breadth and drive a larger solution into their organization. So tracking those sponsors and kind of understanding how they're maneuvering throughout the ecosystem is really, really key for us.
That's great. Yeah. So we've got 2 more minutes. So I just want to obviously let folks know out there that might be listening. If you have any other questions, we'd love to kind of squeeze them in this last couple of minutes. But again, I just want to thank everybody on the panel here. Like I said, selfishly, I've learned a lot from these individuals. I think I'm looking forward to staying close to David and Dion and Jeff and learning more about their organizations. We're going to hopefully continue this narrative and get more and more insight into our customers and prospects around how, leading organizations like Gainsight, Sumo Logic, GitLab, and others who are using Clary, right? I mean, obviously, we really value all of you guys for being customers of our product. But I think the challenge I would give to everyone here who's attending is, 1, thank you for attending. It's great that you guys are paying attention to this metric. I think the metric unto itself is such a reflection of something good, which is you're protecting what you have and you're looking to invest in growth and retention, right? I mean, that is just, there's something so great about this metric, right? I mean, growth is great. I love growing, right? Grow. But when you counter it with that focus on retention, it just really brings it all home together. So I would just challenge everyone here, when you go back to your organizations, ask yourself what you're doing to align to some of the things that our panelists here have shared with you around, operationalizing value selling, right? Operationalizing the rigor of understanding health and the metrics you need to understand health. And what does that health mean for ultimate retention and growth, and making sure that you're thinking about those roles and responsibilities. But as Dion said, in the context of what your organization and your customers need. Don't go back and think, what do I need a CSM to do? Go think about, what does my business need? And who are the people that are skilled up and ready to go satisfy those needs for our customers in our business? So again, to the panelists, thank you guys so much. I loved having you here and being a part of our conference and being a part of this session. So to everyone, have a great rest of the day, and thank you guys so much.
Thanks, awesome.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.